Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jackie McGinnis, and I'm NASA's press secretary. Thank you for joining us. NASA continues along the path toward long-term human exploration of the moon for the first time in history. And in support of our goals at the moon, we're here today to announce the upcoming Sustaining Lunar Development Procurement. I'm joined by several members of NASA's leadership team who will provide additional background about the upcoming RFP and answer any questions you all may have. Today you'll hear from NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, Jim Free, Associate Administrator for NASA's Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate, Lisa Watson-Morgan, Program Manager of NASA's Human Landing System Program, and other NASA experts who will be available to answer your questions. We'll have some brief remarks from our speakers, and then we'll open the line for questions. For reporters on the line, press *1 to get into the question queue. And please remember to state your name and media affiliation and directly address the speaker you'd like to answer your question. Please only ask one question and address one speaker at a time. After, you may enter the queue again to ask additional questions. So to get us started, I'd like to welcome Administrator Bill Nelson.
Hi, everybody. It was about a year ago that NASA had its first competition, selected SpaceX to continue the development of the first commercial human lander. And that lander is going to safely carry the next 2 American astronauts to the lunar surface. I've spoken recently to Gwen Shotwell at SpaceX, and our teams are making good progress on the demonstration HLS award, which will land the first Americans on the moon in over a half a century. That landing will be the first. And from there, we expect approximately 1 human landing per year over a decade or so. And these are not isolated missions. Each is going to build on the past progress. It's going to incredible the discovery and the understanding that we are seeking in what it takes to live in deep space, and all of that is, of course, in preparation for us then to have the first human mission to Mars late in the 2030s or 2040. Now, all of this boils down to that we think, and so does the Congress, that competition leads to better, more reliable outcomes. It benefits everybody. It benefits NASA. It benefits the American people. It is obvious the benefits of competition. And so today's announcement is what I said to Congress. I promised competition, so here it is. Under this new plan, this Sustaining Lunar Development Opportunity, NASA is asking American companies to propose lander concepts capable of transporting astronauts to and from lunar orbit to the surface of the moon for missions beyond the 3rd Artemis. 3rd Artemis is the first demonstration landing on the surface of the moon. These new landers are going to be built and operated according to NASA's Sustaining Lunar Lander requirements, and those capabilities include docking with the orbiting gateway station for crew transfer, increased crew capacity, and transporting more mass for such things as science and exploration on the lunar surface. And so competition is the key to our success. It's going to help ensure that we have the technical capabilities to carry out the mission. And additional landers will help increase the cadence of the missions at which we are able to land astronauts on the surface of the moon. I've heard from several members of Congress over the past year, as well as I've heard from them also in the committee meetings that I've testified to. And they are committed to ensuring that we have more than one lander to choose for future missions. We're expecting to have both Congress support and that of the Biden administration, and we're expecting to get this competition started in the fiscal year 23 budget. And of course, those details should be coming next week when the President announces his budget. So what we're doing today is a bit of a preview. I think you'll find it's an indication that there are good things to come for this agency. And if we're right, it's good things to come for all of humanity. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jim Free, our Associate Administrator, and he's going to get into the details.
Thank you very much, sir, and good afternoon. I'm really excited to share the update with you today, which really continues our reflection on our long-term goal to establish that regular cadence of landing humans on the moon. And you'll hear from Lisa Watson-Morgan here in a moment, who represent the great work of our team to get us here. And those of you that have been following know that our plan was always to return humans to the moon as soon as possible. And we're doing that with SpaceX on Artemis 3, still targeting 2025 for that landing. And SpaceX continues to make good progress towards that mission. But beyond Artemis 3, we want to increase the healthy competition and advance our lunar capabilities to support more science, more exploration, and an emerging lunar marketplace. We are seeing great success in low Earth orbit using a services model, and we have an early opportunity to help American companies become some of the first service providers on the moon. And the best way to reach flexibility and resiliency that we need is through competition and redundancy. That's why we're planning to partner with another company for sustaining lunar lander development and demonstration, as well as offering SpaceX the opportunity to conduct similar work in a parallel procurement. That means potentially two companies developing sustaining lander capabilities and two missions landing astronauts on the moon under the criteria we plan to use for the next decade of Artemis crewed missions, in addition to the first landing, all before we ask for recurring services. This means that when we do start asking for those services, we'll have a stronger market, a more capable pool of potential providers, and a more competitive procurement. Through a robust architecture, this vision promotes access through redundant services, lower costs through competition, and support for the growing space economy on Earth through diverse contributions. And what we're laying out here today is an incremental buildup toward both more advanced lander capabilities and landing services. Artemis is a complex campaign with many exciting milestones ahead of us. Some of you saw just last week Artemis 1 rolling out to the pad for wet dress rehearsal. Truly an incredible moment as we head towards launch in the near future. Hardware for Artemis 2 and 3 is being built right now. Some of it delivered down to Kennedy in the form of the European service module, the crew module. Great work going on at Michoud to work on SLS. The next couple of years will also be major for Gateway. Components for the power and propulsion element and habitation and logistics outposts are underway, and we'll start integration and testing of those next year. We're also making great progress with our critical international partners who will be providing additional Gateway elements. The European Space Agency, 12 countries in Europe, plus Canada, are currently involved in design and construction of the Gateway, as well as 17 states across the U.S. Artemis surface spacesuits are moving towards the services model too, and we are planning to announce that soon as well. Our next area of focus on the moon will be surface mobility and habitation, but our vision goes beyond the moon, and everything we design, build, or procure for Artemis is done with the lens for Mars. But we're here today about the human landing system for the moon, so let's turn it over to Lisa Watson-Morgan now.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. And I'll tell you, as the program manager for the Human Landing System, it is such an honor to be part of the NASA team, and really just a great honor to lead our talented Human Landing System team who's comprised of folks all around the agency. You know, it takes all the different NASA centers and subject matter experts to help make this program successful. And it helps to get us closer to our next step in space exploration. And we're definitely going back to the moon, as you alluded to, and we're not going alone. We're going in a way that represents government, industry, and international partners. So it's a great global effort. And we know that the work we're doing today in working through these procurements and getting to a second provider and still continuing the work with our current contract for our near-term mission with SpaceX, all of this work will help to write new chapters in history. And for that, we are so excited. And so the Human Landing System will take astronauts to the lunar surface as part of Artemis 3 in just a few short years. I mean, I really can't believe that it's almost here. HLS has been busy. Last year, like you mentioned, we awarded what we call Appendix H, Option A, and that work was awarded to SpaceX, and that's one uncrewed and one crewed demonstration mission to the moon, and that work is going great. We're also making excellent progress on what we're calling Appendix N, and that is work that HLS awarded to 5 U.S. American companies to further inform and mature our sustaining requirements in anticipation of this development activity that we're announcing today. And we've also been very busy these last few months in preparing how we are going to purchase these future missions, because that's really key to our future. We've talked about the sustaining lunar development in the past, and today we're excited to tell you about our new approach and this procurement strategy. Our objective is the same, but our approach has definitely improved. We're separating sustainable lander development and demonstration missions from our transportation services, which will create competition and help us expedite the award for the sustainable lander development. And we did much of this through listening to industry. We acquired a lot of industry feedback because, as we mentioned, we're not going at this alone. We need U.S. industry to help NASA and our subject matter experts to make this program successful. So our updated strategy bolsters industry readiness and competition for our future lunar transport and promotes a resilient plan for establishing a long-term presence under Artemis with regular crewed lunar landings. So our strategy allows NASA to partner with industry to develop that second sustainable lander capability, including a crewed demonstration landing, increasing the competitive pool of capable providers ahead of our upcoming and future lunar transportation services for our Artemis astronauts, which is also very key. So NASA is definitely committed to maintaining a flexible and resilient lunar exploration plan that will allow for future commercial partnerships as new capabilities come on and as funding permits. And again, we've been working with industry through Appendix N and through Appendix H, Option A, and even before that with an instrument we called Appendix E. So this has been a long time coming, and we've learned so much from all of those other acquisitions, and we're putting those lessons into this one. So we plan to release a draft request for proposals for sustaining lunar development at the end of this month. And then further inform industry, hold industry days the first week of April to where we get additional feedback from them on what we've released. And once we do that, then later in the spring, we'll release a final RFP, request for proposals, for this sustaining lunar development. It's going to be open to all of industry except for SpaceX, but they'll have the opportunity to negotiate the same sustaining lunar development work under what we're calling Option B of its existing Appendix H contract. Option B was included within the original Appendix H acquisition and will have requirements that mirror this sustaining lunar development, this newer acquisition that we're talking about today. The Artemis 3 mission is unaffected by this change, and it's still on target for no earlier than 2025. Ultimately, NASA is working towards reliable and economic solutions to meet our goals, and our collaborative relationships are definitely vital to the future of space exploration. As we look to land Americans back on the moon for the first time in over 50 years, our innovative astronaut moon landers will be a hallmark in space exploration history. And as I mentioned earlier, we're definitely going to be writing just new chapters in history. We're just going to be forging the path, and we're doing all of this with industry. We're doing this with NASA's subject matter experts, with the vision that Apollo started, with knowing where we're going. It's going to be so exciting, and it's been a long time coming to get this next procurement started, and our team is, everyone is so excited. We're going to have an all hands later today with our team to celebrate this. We're definitely confident in NASA's partnerships with industry to help make the Artemis missions truly successful, and continue, we continue to look forward to working with industry and to answering questions and help. We're so excited that the moon is just the foreground, if you will, as we are preparing for deeper, NASA's preparing for deeper space exploration missions to Mars. And thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Now we'll open the floor for questions from the media. So for reporters on the line, press *1 to get into the queue and to ask a question. Please remember to state your name and your affiliation before you speak and address the specific speaker. And also, please limit it to one question on the first go. So first, we have Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press. Marcia?
Yes, hi, thank you. I was hoping to get some details on the decision-making process for picking the crews for Artemis 2 and 3. Who's picking? How do you decide among the astronauts already identified for the Artemis team, and when might we learn their identities? Thank you.
Let's try to answer your question later, probably the summer, maybe the fall. That decision is made at the level of the Johnson Space Center, signed off by the director of the Johnson Space Center. Usually it comes directly from the head of the astronaut office and the flight operations.
Thank you. And now we have a question from Chris Davenport with the Washington Post. Chris?
Hey, thanks so much. I know you said you're waiting on the president's budget, but I'm just wondering if you can give us any sense, even a ballpark, of how much money you're talking about here. And I just want to confirm that this will be a fixed price contract. Also, there was some mention about a second SpaceX demo mission. I was just curious what that was, or if that's just the uncrewed landing ahead of the crewed landing. Thanks.
The president certainly has the prerogative to announce his own budget, and it's my understanding, Christian, that that's coming next week, early in the week. With regard to the other questions there, Jim?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. This will be fixed price, milestone-based, as we're operating today. And the second SpaceX, that is, as Lisa talked about, we're going to have the open competition for other companies to bid on the sustaining requirements, and we will add to SpaceX's existing contract the option B, which will be to build a lander to the same spec that the other companies will bid on as well. So that is the second SpaceX lander.
Thanks, Jim. Next, I have a question from Michael Sheets with CNBC.
Just to go in a little bit more here on the budgetary side of things, I know that you guys are going to wait until President Biden issues a new idea here, but given the size of the previous contract values and the bids that were placed underneath the HLS program previously, are you expecting that this lunar lander would be in that same range in terms of the contract NASA would award, or are you putting into place a much more stringent policy on the maximum bid here?
Michael, stay tuned with regard to the budget.
And I would just add, we are informed by the bids that we got previously and some of the things we've heard in development with our contractors under the Appendix N, which was to buy down risk to better understand the requirements for this new procurement, which also then will affect what we expect the bids to come in at.
Thanks, and now we have a question from Jeff Faust with Space News.
Hi, question probably for either Jim Free or Lisa Watson-Morgan. I'm just curious how the new program will differ, any difference in structure between sustainable lunar development and the HLS program. Is it just a different set of criteria for the lander, or will there be differences in how they're managed and run?
Lisa, why don't you go ahead and take that one?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jim. And thanks, Jeff, for the question. The HLS program will still be the overall program, and we'll have multiple swim lanes of work under it, projects almost, if you will. And we'll have the option A work, which is the initial lander, uncrewed and crewed. Option B, similarly, and then the sustaining lunar development, have that broad agency announcement, fixed price contract also under it. And so the option B and the sustaining lunar development will have a very similar requirement set. They will be our sustaining requirements, which is really key to getting, to the sustainable campaign that we're wanting to get to.
Now we have a question from Bill Harwood with CBS News.
I just want to make sure I understand what you guys are saying. So SpaceX will carry out the demo landing and the Artemis 3 landing under their current contract and then be able to compete for a sustaining contract with everyone else for follow-on vehicles? Or does the option you're exercising with SpaceX now include that third lander? And I apologize for my denseness. I'm just not sure I get it. Thanks.
No, Mr. Harwood, I understand. We want to make sure everybody gets it, so it's not that at all. So the option B will be negotiated strictly with SpaceX on their existing contract, and then so we exercise that based on the option we have in that contract, and then there'll be a separate competitive procurement for everyone but SpaceX to propose to those lander requirements, to the sustainable lander requirements. So they'll have the uncrewed and the crewed demo for 3. Then they will, under option B, develop another lander to our sustainable requirements, which will likely have an uncrewed and a crewed version as well. And then the competition for everyone else will be separate to the same set of requirements, but also with an uncrewed and a crewed lander.
Next, we have a question from Marina Koren with The Atlantic.
Hi, everyone. This question is for Administrator Nelson about relations with Russia in light of the war in Ukraine. NASA statements have stressed that NASA and Roscosmos are dedicated to cooperating. At the same time, the CEO of the company that is developing one of the lunar landing systems that we're talking about today is making public statements like challenging Putin to a physical fight. I'm wondering, how does something like that, or how could it affect NASA's working relationship with Russia moving forward? Thank you.
You've heard me, Marina, say that the professional relationship between the astronauts and the cosmonauts on board the station, as well as the professional relationship between mission control in both Houston and Moscow, continues unaltered. And that's what we expect, and I think a real clue for you was last Friday when 3 cosmonauts launched on a Soyuz as expected, as planned, even after some of this talk that you're talking about. And it is expected, without a hitch, that 2 cosmonauts and Mark Vande Hei will return at the end of this month as planned. And all personnel, American and Russian, involved in that landing are being put in place. So the professional relationship continues unaltered.
Next, we have a question from Kenneth Chang with the New York Times.
Hi, thank you. The crewed demonstration from the second provider, would that be Artemis 5, or would it be like an additional mission added to the Artemis manifest?
I think we're looking at the delivery of these landers in the 2026-2027 timeframe. So we'll look at assignments as each provider, SpaceX and the other provider, move through their path of development. So we haven't assigned them to a mission today because we want to see how the development goes. As we know, the development of this is challenging and difficult. So we're looking at more of when they'll be done and how they're going to be done to then look at where they're assigned to. But the 2026-2027 timeframe is where we're looking right now.
Next, we have Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Thanks, Jackie. The press release, it sounds like the option B for SpaceX HLS has already been exercised. If that's so, when did that option get exercised, and what does it bring SpaceX's total HLS contract to? And for Lisa, could you just clarify that new entrants in this program would do a demo mission that would be outside of the operational Artemis 4, 5, 6, 7, and so forth, or is the idea to handle it more like how Sierra Nevada is becoming a CSR provider without doing demo missions before going to the station? Just for understanding how you're thinking about on-ramping a second provider. Thank you.
Okay, and Jim, if you want to jump in, this is Lisa, feel free. But option B has not been exercised. We are planning on, working towards that. And we, for the second provider, this competition that we have, once we choose that provider, then they will need to perform an uncrewed landing demonstration, as well as a crewed flight. And as Jim, was discussing, a lot of it depends on their development, the speed at which they're able to go, how mature they are. And as I mentioned earlier, we have had, numerous other mechanisms, Appendix E, Appendix H, and Appendix N, all building up and leading to additional progress, to get various providers ready for this opportunity. And so that's how we will do it. It's not necessarily an on-ramp per se.
Next, we have a question from Eric Berger with Ars Technica.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this. I want to make sure I understand this, and I hate to belabor it, but just so we're clear, the current plan now is that Appendix H envisions an uncrewed landing by SpaceX, Artemis 3, and then one additional Artemis mission. And then the Appendix N missions that we're discussing here means that one additional company will be awarded a development contract to do an uncrewed demonstration mission, a crewed flight. And then once all that's done, then you will have awards for future sustaining missions to one or both of those companies. Is that right? Or if not, please explain.
Eric, you had it almost correct. The only thing you missed was on the SpaceX side, we have the uncrewed and crewed that are associated with the option A in Appendix H, and then there'll be an uncrewed and crewed on option B for SpaceX, and then the remainder of it for the new provider you had correct, and then how we transition into services. So you just had one uncrewed mission for the sustainable lander under SpaceX missing.
Thanks. And I have a question from Mike Wall with Space.com.
Thank you for doing this. Just a quick timeline question. When, if all goes according to plan with the RFPs and so on, I mean, like, when do you foresee actually awarding this second contract? I mean, how much time do you want this to give the second developer to kind of get up and running by 2026, 2027?
So if everything goes as planned, we definitely, as soon as we possibly can, but at the onset of the new year's when we would, shortly thereafter, is when we would like to award.
Next, we have a question from Lauren Grush with The Verge.
Thank you, Jackie. My question is for Bill. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate more on the kinds of assurances you have received from Congress that there will be additional funding for the second lander, seeing as how the budget shortfall was the main reason that SpaceX was the sole selection for the original HLS contract. So how certain are you that that money will materialize?
Well, it was Congress that agreed with my position that we ought to have competition, and therefore, why don't you ask that question again after you see the president's budget?
Next, we have a question from Alan Boyle with GeekWire.
Thank you. I'm interested in the transition from Appendix N to the new program. Can you talk about the lessons learned from Appendix N, and how can you provide any more details on how the requirements for the Sustainable Lander program have been changed, perhaps because of those lessons? It sounds like it would call for more astronauts to be on board, larger cargo capacity. Maybe Lisa or somebody could provide more details about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is Lisa. I can certainly start that. So in looking at what we wanted for a sustaining lunar campaign, you're exactly right. We want more cargo. We want more upmass. Clearly, we want more science. We want more days to do, our EVAs on the moon. So with that, what we did is that Appendix N had an initial set of sustaining requirements, and we have been working with 5 industry providers on their concepts, helping them mature their concepts, all each unique and different, with that, with those updated set of requirements. And so we've been doing that, for a good 6 months or so. We plan to continue working with them on it as much as we can. And so from that, they were able to provide us feedback through different task orders that we, wrote back and forth, and that helped to inform us as to whether we, changed this location or asked them to launch a certain way, different requirements. Then what it made us do is say, okay, well we could live with, maybe a little less here or a little more here. And so it helped us to refine and hone in on our requirements of what was really important, as well as what's most important is balancing to make the mission doable by as many industry providers as possible. And I think that's really key to what the administrator was talking about with his desire for competition. You know, you can't just make the mission solely doable by one industry provider. We have to work with all of industry to say, this is still great science. This is still what we want. And it opens up the aperture for more to have the opportunity, that then bolsters the nation and helps STEM and excites the next generation.
Next, we have a question from Joey Roulette.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. I guess this could be for Lisa or Jim. I'm wondering if there's anything you did this time around designing the SLD program that kind of makes it more resilient to lawsuits or legal fights that you maybe didn't do for the Option A award. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I would say, the way everything played out with the Option A selection demonstrated that we had stuck to our policies and procedures that we use when we do procurements. And certainly I think Lisa and her team did a lot to provide all the information that was requested along the way to demonstrate that. So from my perspective, we're going to follow that same path here because that's where it was determined that we worked well in the Option A selection.
Next, we have a question from Jonathan O'Callaghan with Scientific American.
Hi, thanks for doing the call. Question for Bill. Does this announcement affect the development of SLS at all? Will you be open to mission architectures that don't involve SLS, or do you still see that as a kind of necessity for each of these crewed landings on the moon? Thank you.
Do I understand your question to be, does this affect the architecture of the SLS?
Does it affect the mission architecture that involves using SLS? Will you be open to other landing suggestions that don't involve SLS and Orion?
No, we are proceeding exactly along as planned. And remember, when you get around to Artemis 4, you've got the extended upper stage. So you have a larger, more powerful rocket than Artemis 1 and 2 and 3. We have to have another mobile platform that is taller because it's a larger rocket. That's the only difference in the architecture.
Next, we have a question from Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. And I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, so bear with me. But in the beginning, you were going to choose 2 contractors under Option A, and you didn't because Congress only gave you 25% of the funding. So that forced you into the situation where now you have one contractor, and now you're doing this separate procurement with a different set of requirements. So is this a situation where it actually was good news that Congress didn't give you all the money you needed because somewhere along the way you already decided that the first SpaceX lander was not going to be enough for the sustained mission? I guess I'm trying to find out what had happened if Congress had given you the full funding so that you could have chosen 2 HLS providers originally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I guess I would say, I mentioned earlier that we learned things on Appendix N that helped us understand the requirements and our configurations better, which helped us how we put this solicitation out. So and we bought down technology risk as well in Appendix N. So we're anticipating that some of that drops the cost of the landers. We also have instituted in this procurement options in both option periods in both the option B and in the broader procurement, where if we don't have enough funding, we will, or someone's not progressing, we will move off of that procurement. So it's not, when we do this, we're buying both landers at the same time. This is a progressive buildup as we go that says we're making the budget that we have available to take each of these measured steps down the path towards getting a lander. So when we exercise the option B or the new procurement, it doesn't say, hey, we have selected them forever. So we'll look at the budget, and you'll see it when it comes out, and we'll look for the bids that many folks have told us, hey, we've learned a lot, and we think our bids can be better this time also.
Next, we have a question from Paul Brinkman with Aerospace America.
Hi, yes, thanks for doing this. For Lisa Watson Morgan, I guess I'm looking for some big picture description of how you're approaching this. When SpaceX was chosen, you emphasized the kind of unique new approach they provided in their lander proposal. So now I know you're going to be getting feedback from industry, but to what extent are you going to be interested in prioritizing like a unique approach that is, something completely different than SpaceX's method? If you could just talk about that a little bit. Thanks.
Sure. So that's a very good question as well. So as we are preparing for the sustaining, lunar development, really what we'll be looking for are industry providers who can meet the requirements and or exceed the requirements that we have listed that will come out in the near term in the draft RFP. And then we'll be looking clearly for, how they operate, as well as, what Jim said, what kind of bids we receive. So that will be, similar to how we did it the first time around.
Next, we have a question from George Dvorsky from Gizmodo.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for doing this. My question is for either Lisa or Jim, given that you both said that progress with the SpaceX solution for Artemis 3 is going well, that it's going, that everything's going great, in your words. I'm hoping that you can provide more details. We all know, of course, that the rocket has yet to leave the planet, and there's other happenings having to do, for example, with the launch site and the Aviation Administration still looking into all that. But I'm wondering if you could be more specific. For example, if things are going great, what milestones in particular have been met? And just wondering if there are any other specifics that you can share where you feel that progress is being made with this particular solution. And as a secondary question, wondering if there is a target date for the uncrewed demo mission. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you for the question. What I can share with you is that so far SpaceX has met all their milestones to date. We're working closely with them, and you're right, they do have some important tests coming up. They also have, within those tests, mitigations planned for some of the areas that we are interested in and concerned with, as are they. And so collectively, the team, the NASA team, they're soliciting subject matter experts from us in a myriad of areas, and we're working deeply with them to make sure that we have the right risk-based insight that's needed. So far, I would say, as far as the integrated master schedule, things are on track. And you're right, there are some potential areas that we're watching out for, as are they. But to date, all milestones have been met, and we are good to go. And right now, we have 2024 as our uncrewed demo flight.
Next, we have a question from Stephen Clark with Space Flight Now. Stephen?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm going to follow up on the previous question with Lisa Watson-Morgan. You talked about some mitigations in some areas that you're concerned with, things you're watching as you march down the development of the Starship HLS variant. Can you talk about what those are? And also, can you also take a step back and talk about the big picture ConOps for how the Starship HLS works? I know that involves multiple refueling missions, et cetera. How many launches will be required to support each Starship sortie to the moon?
Thanks for the question. So I'll say that we're working closely with SpaceX on this, and if you know anything, I know you guys are super familiar with their model. So if you're familiar with their model, they are certainly improving every day. I think that they say waste everything but time, but as just a cachet kind of thing. So they're working hard to try to bring in schedules that are already on schedule. That's just kind of the way they work. And as far as what we're concerned about, I would say just from an overall standpoint, their near-term milestones address those as well as their upcoming tests. So we feel that, right now we're on a really solid path. Clearly with any complex, space flight mission, there's, NASA's always interested in crew safety, and I will say that SpaceX is super responsive to all the areas related to crew safety, all the areas around life support, all the, making sure that we get the tests on time. All of that work is going very, very well.
Next, we have a question from Alicia Sowers with Mashable.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. This is a question for Bill Nelson. Representatives from the IG and GAO offices recently told a congressional committee that they believed a more realistic ETA for landing people on the moon was 2026 or later. And I guess I'm just wondering, how concerned are you about NASA's current timeline for returning humans to the moon compared to what you know of China's timeline? Thank you.
We are scheduled for an uncrewed lander on the moon in 24, for a crewed lander on the moon in 25. And as to when the Chinese are going to land, I do not know.
Next, we have a question from Ken Kramer with Space Up Close.
Hi, thank you for doing this, and it was spectacular to be at the Artemis 1 rollout. Thank you for having us all there. My question is about the uncrewed demo. I wanted to know when it was, and you just said that, but I'd like to know, can you tell us some more details about that? Is the design still in progress? Have they started the assembly? Where will it land? And are you going to do any science on that mission? Thank you.
So this is Lisa again. We're working with SpaceX right now on all the aspects of what that flight could be, because naturally at the time, if there are opportunities for additional experiments or payloads, we would naturally want to capitalize on that. As we mentioned, it's in 2024. We're working through what that system will look like, what will it have on it, what will we test out, and the requirement is really to safely land. That is the requirement, and if we are able to capture more and do more with that, clearly we will, but right now we're on track and looks like we will have everything ready at that time.
And if I could just add to that, we're going to take every opportunity we can when we're putting things on the lunar surface to take science with us. This Artemis architecture and plan, our primary objectives are getting the crew back safely from the mission and doing science. So every time we can land something on the lunar surface, we're gonna try and do that. And I just want to back up to Mr. Berger's question, just because I probably said this wrong. For SpaceX, on the new option B, we're going to have a crewed lander. Okay, and for the other new entrant, we will have an uncrewed and a crewed. So I'm sorry for confusing that earlier. Thanks.
Next, we have a question from Russell Pounds with Pacific Rim Media.
Good morning. This is Russell in Anchorage, Alaska today. The question's for Lisa. You've been a NASA engineer for quite a long time. What has surprised or delighted you about our country's Artemis efforts to take a lander from lunar orbit to the surface of the moon? And I'm thinking here about along the lines of innovation since the last time we tried this 50 years ago. Thanks.
Oh, great question. And thanks for the question. So I think what's most exciting to me is that we are doing it a little bit differently this time. You know, we're not specifying the design, as, you know, an additional question earlier was asked. We're opening up and saying, hey, here are the requirements, and any, you know, any design that meets or exceeds these, that's safe, that, you know, can do the things that we want, we're very interested in. So I think just spurring innovation is something that really excites me, because it's been so traditional for NASA in the past, and really the right way at the time, to say, hey, here is explicitly and detailed-wise exactly what we want. And there is a time and place for that. And I think industry now is to a point to where we can try different methods. And to me, it's really exciting trying this novel approach.
Next, we have a question from Derek Newsom with Space Scouts.
Hi, my question is for Lisa Watson-Morgan. The HLS landers were baselined around a 3-stage single-use lander. The new landers being outlined, will the baseline be the same lander, or is NASA planning on releasing a new baseline?
Good question. And so initially we had a, 3-element government reference design, and that was just to help the NASA team to hone up and understand from a physics-based standpoint, entry, looking at the different aerothermal, plume surface interaction, all the items that are important, in general for us to understand. And so what we are doing now is we're saying, okay, we're not asking for that 3-stage lander. What we're saying is we have, in the order of 40 functional and performance requirements that we want these lander systems to be able to do for us. And that's landing on, at a certain slope. It's being able to survive, a period of time, potentially without light. And so there are different requirements that we have related to that aspect. And so with that approach, we feel that we could get some very interesting and innovative concepts. So we are not prescribing necessarily a 3-element architecture.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we'll only have time for one more question. Robert Coppinger from Spaceflight Magazine, if you could close this out.
Sure. So you call this the sustaining lunar development opportunity, and you're going to require landers to take cargo and equipment to the moon if you're going to build on each mission to extend your capability on the lunar surface. So we've talked a lot about today about taking crew to the surface, but can you just talk about, is there more to this sustaining lunar development opportunity you're going to have? Is part of the competition also going to be delivering cargo and equipment to the surface? And I think maybe also, if you can clarify, you mentioned uncrewed and crewed, and I think maybe there's a bit of confusion between an uncrewed demo of a lander that will carry crew, and then an uncrewed lander which will never have crew because it takes down cargo. Is that a confusion that's arisen today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. This is Lisa. I appreciate that question, actually, because our intention, I can see how that would need to be clarified. So the purpose of the uncrewed demo is to prove out from a safety standpoint that the lander system will be able to safely land. And so it is a critical part of the demonstration strategy that we have in mind before we're able to put crew on it. And then therein, like within a year later, we'll have the crewed demonstration. And we will use what we learned from the uncrewed in order to do that. Now, that uncrewed lander may also, we may leverage that landing to put some science on it. I think is what Jim was alluding to, trying to make the most out of each landing, as, landings are really precious to us. Now, within this lander construct, many of the industry providers have said that large cargo, we're talking in the 14-ton range, there's a lot of synergy between that type of large cargo delivery and their human landing system designs. As such, we are offering up, if they have that type of ability, to provide us price estimates on things like that.
Thank you all so much for joining today's call and for helping spread the news. As a reminder, you can listen to a replay of this teleconference later today by calling 866-455-0436. And replays will be available until April 23rd. As always, if there's any additional questions, I know we didn't make it to all the questions in the queue, so apologies for that. You can email Jimmy Russell or Janet Sudnick, and they will be happy to get you additional information. As a reminder, you can find PAO contact information for the Office of Communications at nasa.gov and follow along and learn more about the Artemis program at nasa.gov/moon to Mars. Thanks again and have a great day.